Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Donny and I've been doing reviews of Star Trek Picard. We are now on episode 6 of the first season. This episode is titled The Impossible Box, and I found this to be a very interesting episode because I thought of it as kind of like the bridge episode that's bridging the first part of the season together with what's going to happen during the last act of the season, presumably the final 3 episodes, 7 through 10. So, as my reviews typically go, I begin my video by giving you my overall impressions of the episode, and then I branch into talking about spoilers. I will be prompting you when I get to that point, so just make sure that you heed that disclaimer so you don't accidentally hear any spoilers. This episode was very interesting in the sense that at first it seemed like a filler episode, but then gradually as you move forward into it, you get to see that it becomes a little bit more high-paced and adds some very crucial elements to the story overall being conveyed in Star Trek Picard. Overall, I think that the pacing was excellent. I found the music to be oddly moving during this episode as well. I mean, I've loved the music this whole series, but for some reason, I guess I was just more aware of the music this time around because there were quite a few very poignant moments that I will be talking about here shortly. I think that this episode possesses a lot of what some Star Trek fans have wanted, and they've wanted a little bit more, let's say, Picard himself. In this episode, we do get that. We get more, introspective moments on his part. We get to see more of his reactions to things, and I think that that really kind of helped us develop more of an understanding of how this character has changed over the past 20 years. So I really enjoyed that. To me, that was the highlight of this episode. And of course, there's return of a particular character, but I'm not going to say the name yet, because that's going to be for the spoiler portion. And conveniently, I guess that transitions excellently into the spoiler portion of this video. So if you do not like spoilers, please click away and do not watch any further. If you want spoilers or you don't care and you've already seen it and you want to have some thoughts on this episode / commentary, well, here you go. You're going to enjoy this segment. So the beginning of this episode is left off with what happens at the end of the last episode. So we see that it is occurring right after Dr. Maddox's death. So Jurati is mourning, she's grieving, and she is being spoken to by Picard. And then later in this episode, a little while after this, she's having a conversation with Rios, and there's this very odd romance moment. Honestly, I don't know how I feel about the romance between Jurati and Rios yet. I thought it was a little bit randomly occurring, although, I mean, I guess there have been moments where we've seen them kind of flirt with each other, but hopefully in the next few episodes, if this is going to be a thing, I hope that they kind of expand on it a little bit, because I was just yeah, are we putting in love, or are we putting in a relationship where it doesn't belong yet? I don't know. But, I mean, that's just a small concern or criticism that I have of this episode. I found this episode to be very interesting because we get to see the crew that we've been introduced to start, embarking on their journey past, the whole situation with Maddox. So they're on their way to go find Dr. Soji Asha, who is on the Borg Cube, the reclamation site that the Romulans currently own, and Hugh, as we've seen already, is the director of this reclamation site. In this episode, we get to see a lot of information about the reclamation site, what it is. Essentially, it is a Borg Cube and that was captured, and Hugh is overseeing the de-assimilation of a variety of different Borg drones. When Picard finally meets face-to-face with Hugh, it's an amazing moment because they recognize each other. Hugh seems to be unbelievably happy that Picard is there. Let's just say that Hugh seems to be very proud of his work, and he shows the work to Picard, and Picard sees that while he's kind of traumatized by being in a Borg cube, that Hugh is actually doing great work and helping reverse the effects of assimilation, which I think is pretty powerful. We see all of these different characters who were former Borg trying to, undo some of the damage that the Borg has done, or at least try to carve their own way in life. We've seen that with Seven of Nine, obviously with Picard, now with Hugh. We do get a lot of references in this episode to Picard's time in the collective as Locutus, and we can see throughout a variety of different moments that Picard is still very much traumatized by his experiences. And if memory serves me correctly, if I'm like doing some quick calculations in my mind, this show takes place about like, what, 25, 30 years after he was actually assimilated on the Enterprise D. So it's interesting to see all of those parallels. I would argue that they're kind of Easter eggs in a way. But we see that when he first gets to this reclamation site, it's a very difficult experience for him. He's having flashbacks, a lot of PTSD, but Hugh kind of brings him out of that, which, again, I thought was very interesting because, I mean, well, we haven't seen a huge dynamic between those two characters in a very, very long time. So obviously in this episode, Dr. Soji Asha discovers that she is in fact not real. Narek, in his insidious ways, along with his sister, both being members of the Zad Vash, are trying to kind of guide her without triggering her, you know, into her android ways, but that ends up happening. Picard finds her, and then Hugh ends up managing to help them escape through a portal device called a spatial trajector, which is another Easter egg, by the way, because this kind of harkens back to an episode in Star Trek Voyager, I believe it was season 1, where the Voyager crew finds a planet, I think it's called Sakaris. Is it Sakaris or Sakara? Sakaris, I think. And it's a very benevolent species, but they have this technology that Voyager tries to use. Well, apparently the Borg must have gotten a hold of this technology through assimilating members of that race, which was a very, very warming nod to Star Trek Voyager. But by the end of this episode, like, Picard ends up escaping this Romulan reclamation site, but Hugh and Elnor are left behind to fend off Tal Shiar, you know, agents. So it very much ended on a cliffhanger, and Elnor, of course, got to have a lot of his, you know, moments, which I really appreciate. However, I'm kind of worried because Picard wasn't super transparent to Hugh about what's going on. The fact that Soji is an android, and I really feel like that could potentially create some conflict between those two characters, because in a sad way, Picard was using Hugh for his resources, and I was hoping that there would be a little bit more warmth between the two characters. We may get a little bit more context on that. I'm not 100% sure. But I will say that pacing-wise, I thought that they did a nice job putting in action, but not too much action. So the last half of the episode did very well in that area. But anyway, share your thoughts in the comment section below if you watched this episode. I would like to know how you felt. Overall, I give it an A-. I think that there were a lot of really good elements, but I think that that kind of forced romance at the beginning between Jurati and Rios was a little bit, you know, not needed, in my opinion. And I would have hoped that Picard and Hugh would have had at least a little bit more of an exchange, or a little bit more dialogue. But that's just me. That's my preferences. Anyway, again, subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Keep watching the series because it's getting really good.